Shalom, shalom, peace and blessings with you, Mr. Lee Weissman. I'm Lale Tuncer. This is Lee Weissman, and we're here from the Universal God Message of Peace charity to talk about the Golden Rule. So we're going to be talking about what is the Golden Rule, why it is important, and how it can help repair our relationships and bring world peace and end world poverty, and how we can become more able to treat others how we want to be treated. So over to you, Mr. Weissman. What is the goal?
So first, I want to give a shout out to my first grade teacher, Mrs. Tismar, um, who has passed on. But every morning when in my first grade class, she would say to everybody, to all the students, "What is the golden rule?" And we all had to say, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. We would say that every single day. That was her ritual, and I had her for 2 years for first grade and second grade, and every day, first grade, second grade, and what's the golden rule? Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. What I didn't realize was that Mrs. Tismar of blessed memory was really sharing with me what I think is what's sharing with us what is really the core of of Abrahamic morality. And I'll say Muslim morality, Jewish morality, Christian morality, I think all circle around one basic concept. And I'll start with the Torah. I guess that's sort of the good historical place to start. And you know, the Torah says love your neighbor as yourself. And as a gloss to that, there was once a Greek man who was looking for information about Judaism, and he went to one rabbi, Rabbi Shammai, and he said, and he knocked on his door, and he said, "I'll convert to Judaism if you can teach me the Torah on 1 foot." And I hit him with a stick and said, "Go away." He goes to another rabbi, Rabbi Hillel, and Rabbi Hillel said to him, "Do not do to others what you would not want them to do to you." And he said, the rest is commentary. Go and learn it. Okay, so there we have our golden rule right there. Now let's go to the New Testament for a second. Once again, working historically. In the New Testament, there's a famous story that very often, I think, in translations of the New Testament, it's translated as a lawyer, which I think is very nice. I'm going to keep it that way, even though I don't think it was really a lawyer. I think it was just a scholar. So the scholar comes up to Jesus and says to him, he says, "How does a person get into the kingdom of heaven?" Right? It's a pretty fair question. And he says, 2 things. Love the Lord with all your heart, with all your might, and love your neighbor as yourself. So basically, he says that there are basically 2 things. And then he goes on to the discussion of who is your neighbor. Just a very important discussion. That's where we have the parable of the Good Samaritan, and to answer that question of who is your neighbor. Now we skip further into Islam. Famous Hadith Qudsi. Hadith Qudsi is a sort of higher level of Hadith, and it's included in all the collections of the 40 major Hadiths, which are the sayings of the Prophet. And the Prophet said, "A person who does not love for his brother what he loves for himself is not from our people." Meaning which is a very interesting thing to say that the definition of that according to the Prophet, definition of being a Muslim, right? Not among our people, is that a person has to love for someone else what they love, what they love for themselves. And Ibn Kathir, one of the great commentators, says, well, wait a second, is this brother, maybe that just means your fellow Muslim. He says, no, it means your brother in humanity. So that means for any human being. So so here's a very, very basic teaching. To love for someone else what you love for what you love for for yourself, to want for other people what you want for yourself. And in the Jewish formulation, and I'll explore that a little bit, the negative, not to do to other people what you don't want them to do. Now, the negative is interesting.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
think,
exactly.
I
And
think, yeah, go ahead.
no, it's okay, you carry on.
So I think the negative has to do a little bit with human psychology, that we're a little more aware of the things that we don't like than the things that we do like. We have kind of a negative bias. So if you ask somebody, what are your favorite foods? It may take them a while to kind of compile the list. Well, they'll say, well, I sort of like this, I sort of like that. But if you ask them what they absolutely hate, usually they can come up with the list pretty quickly, right? We have a very strong sense of the things that we don't like. We know, right? We know the things that we really can't stand.
Yeah. So my next question is then surely all of this is based on experience. Or is there another way of knowing what one likes and dislikes without having experienced negative experiences and positive experiences from interactions with other human beings? So that's my next question. Is there a way of how can we treat others how we want to be treated haven't if we haven't had any negative or positive experiences with interactions with other human beings?
Well, first of all, I think we've all had those we've all had interactions, and I think we all have a sense of those things. But let's start with the basics. I mean, the basics are, and this is in the Catholic Church, they call these the corporal acts of mercy, which is a very fancy way of saying providing for people's physical needs. I mean, the first thing is every person needs to be clothed, warm, right? They need to have a roof over their head, and they need to have food in their stomach, and they need to have clean water to drink. Every single person needs that, right? Every person wants that.
Every
Everybody.
person wants that, yes, you're right, but we
Yeah.
don't often reflect on it, do we? And unless we can actually make time to think about what it is we really want and need, then unless we do that, then we're not going to be able to willingly and in a way that we're aware of treat others how we want to be treated. So
We're so used to these things, right? I'm used to waking up in a house, right, with a roof over my head. I'm used to sleeping, to waking up under warm blankets. I'm used to waking up to my closet full of clothes. I'm used to, to going down to my refrigerator and having my cornucopia of food to choose from, and maybe I'm not aware of how important those things are for me. Maybe that's the value of something like fasting, right? When we fast, we suddenly realize how important food is to us. Right? We're
yeah.
coming up on Ramadan very soon for Muslim brothers and sisters, become aware like that food is really important. If I don't have it, I have trouble functioning, right? And of
Yeah,
course,
so it could be that sometimes these experiences that, people face in their lives of hardship and loss, the experience of loss, could it be there as a blessing in disguise to teach us to be grateful and then to appreciate these things and to understand better what it is we really want and need so that we can then treat others how we want to be treated?
I remember when my mother passed away. I had when my mother passed away, everybody kept bringing me food, Okay, they kept bringing me food, and I had plates and plates of cookies and cakes, and people kept bringing food and bringing food and bringing food. And I finally said to people, I said, please don't bring me food because that's not what I need. Right?
Mm.
Just sit down with me, sit down with me and let me talk to you about my mother and tell you some stories about her, let me, speak my heart out a little bit. But like, please, I don't need cookies. So now I know that when somebody passes away, like my job is not to bring them cookies. You know, that that I'm my guess is now, of course, we have to understand that other people are not us, right? That's not an easy lesson, by the way, right? We have to understand that not everybody thinks like us or feels like us. And so we have to be able to gauge, what it is that they need. But having had that experience, I feel like I have a better idea of what people need when somebody important to them passes away, that,
You're more likely to be able to empathize with others
right.
because of your own experience.
And so that, the cookies are nice. Somebody once told me, um, uh, uh, a, a man once told me that you should never bring a woman, a potted plant. You should never bring a woman a potted plant. And I said, why? He says, like as a gift. And he says,
Mhm.
because a potted plant is just another thing to take care of. Right? So women have so many things to take care of. It's not nice to bring them one more thing uh, to take care of. So that is a reality that like would never have occurred to me, and so trying to understand, what other people need means paying attention to yourself, and especially when it comes to emotional needs, like we all need, we want to feel, affection, we want to feel admiration, we want to feel um, other people's compassion. We want to know, we want to know that they care about us in a kind in a regular way, right? We like when people check in with us. We like when people, there are all sorts of things that we know about ourselves, and or when we're sick. Somebody said to me, and this is a great thing, if you want to know how to take care of another person, think of yourself when you're sick, right? When you're sick and you're in bed and you're miserable, hey, what do you want? Okay, you want warm. You want somebody to come and say, "How are you, poor baby?" Right? You want somebody to pat your head. He says that most people, whenever they're hurting in any way, just think of them as being like sick people. And you know what you need when you're sick. We're very delicate and sensitive. You treated everybody with the delicacy and the sensitivity that you want when you're sick, um, then
Yeah,
everybody would be much happier.
I think in essence, we all just want to be loved and want to feel loved unconditionally for who we are. And that love can express itself through various ways, like through respect for for some people, through appreciation, through showing gratitude, or through forgiveness, or through having mercy on you for something that you might have done which probably might deserve punishment or something, but somebody chooses to have mercy on you, um um bec- through acts of loving kindness, through yeah, I've said respect, uh,
Yeah,
all
no,
sorts of ways that people can behave in order, but but underneath all of that, it's, I think, the core is that it's because of love, because they love you, and they you want to feel loved, basically. I think we all just
yeah,
want to feel loved. We're all like babies that want to feel loved.
no, and I think it's not just that we're all like babies. I think we all are babies.
Yeah, we are. We
No.
just all want, our mothers, that motherly sort of comfort, the comfort of the breast, the comfort of the mother's milk.
Right. And I think I think we look for that comfort.
Mhm.
And you know, and we know, I mean, you know, in our interactions, you know, nobody wants to walk into a room where you know somebody holds a grudge against you, right? I mean, you never want to do that, right? It's a horrible experience. Nobody wants that. Uh, and so therefore, you know, you can kind of look and think to yourself, if you're holding a grudge, if you're carrying something that around with you, like think to yourself, okay, do I really want to give that to somebody else? I mean, that hurts me so much, and we know how much it hurts, right? We know if we're paying attention, you can feel it in your body, you know, when you're around something like that. And so we can say, okay, we don't want that for somebody else, or disrespect, you know, when somebody disrespects us, I mean, it really it
Embarrasses you, or yeah,
yeah.
something. Yeah,
And
it's not.
it's not only that, it's we experience it. They did a study some years ago about I read too much. I apologize. Uh, it was about social anxiety, right?
Mhm.
Social anxiety. And they tried treating social anxiety with aspirin. And apparently it worked. And so they're trying to think, well, okay, why is it? Because people with social anxiety reported that they felt better when they took aspirin. So they thought, okay, well, that seems strange. Well, the reason why is because their brains were experiencing the pain of social anxiety as
Mhm.
pain, right? And so a pain reliever relieved the pain. So it means that when somebody doesn't respect us, or we're having a social feeling, so to speak,
Mhm.
that we're experiencing a kind of pain. It hurts, you know? And so do we really want to impose, we want to put that on someone else? And the answer, at least from the spiritual side, is no, we don't want to do that. And in each of these cases, that's not just a kind of nicety of religion, it's the essence of religion, right?
Mhm.
And that's the most amazing thing about the three examples I gave. I mean, are all saying this is like the center. This is the exact center, right? There is that faith, that faith really circles around all of this. Everything that we do, right? Everything that we do is really to allow this to happen.
Bring us to this point where we do
Right.
this. Yeah.
Right.
And imagine the world if, we all did this more, what kind of worlds it would be with all the war happening and everything. I think if everybody, just for those who are involved in war, it must be so difficult on either side. But just to imagine, just to take a moment to imagine being on the other side. And would you want to be the recipient of what you are doing to the person or the families on the
Right.
other side? And if the answer is no, then we need to put down our weapons right now,
Yeah.
really.
Well,
Uh,
I have to tell you that the question, you know, I sometimes get in trouble for saying this, but the question that Jesus asked about that verse is a great question. You know, who is your brother? And it was also asked of the Quran version as well. And listen, I think that this is, from my perspective, the wider you can draw that circle, the better. I think that what happens in the case of war and the situations of conflict, not just wars, but even the little wars that people have, you know, even in relationships, is the other person becomes so other that we no longer care about what happens to them. You know, even if it happens, you know, God forbid, even in marriages and families and things like that, where, you know, yes, of course, I know that you hate this, but I don't care. Right? You know, I know you hate this, I know you hate this, but I don't care because you're now so far out of my circle of concern that it doesn't matter anymore. And I think that's what happens in war. And I think that's a very dangerous thing, right? We should be able to look I believe that we should be able to look at any human face and be able to understand, that this is a human face that feels pain in exactly the same way that we feel pain, and feels happiness in the same way we feel happiness.
And the creation of our God, our creator, God has chosen to create every single person. So if we respect and love our creator, then we will respect and love his creation. And just the fact that he's choosing to give them the breath of life should be enough to respect.
Yeah, and ourselves, it's not a coincidence that it says, you could say, to love your neighbor as yourself, right? Love your neighbor as yourself. Don't do unto others what you wouldn't do unto you. Also means, like, don't do to yourself what you shouldn't do to you. Like, don't do to yourself the things that which are that are going to be horrible for you. Right? That's
We all come
also
from Adam and Eve, and the other person is our brother and is our sister, because if we see it that we all come from the same, we're all part of one body, one soul, really, aren't we? So we are hurting ourselves when we knowingly hurt somebody else. And
And
it,
even in the most practical way, honestly, I
yeah,
mean, it's kind of like, we do have to live in this world, like at the end of the day, it's like messing up your own, living room. I I was once in Israel, and there was like a protest. There was like a protest, and they started burning trash, and they were burning tires. And I said to one guy, said, "What are you protesting?" He says, "Oh, well, the government did this and the government did that." And I said, "Well, but the government isn't suffering, you're suffering because you're burning the tires in your neighborhood and you're burning the trash in your neighborhood. You're the one who suffers." And I think that the whole world is, in some sense, our neighborhood. And when we make a mess out of it, we make a mess out of um, out of our relationships with people, and we make a mess out of, you know, by not respecting, not giving them the things that they need, then we have to live in that world, right? We have to live with those relationships, and that's like,
yeah, exactly. And what's quite tragic is that often we see people who have had negative experiences done onto them by others. They repeat that behavior and even use it as an excuse to enable them to get away with doing it to other people. Whereas actually this teaching of do not do unto others what you do not want to be done to you, if you've actually been there and had that painful experience of somebody hurting you, somebody, doing the worst things to you, then if anything, that person probably holds a higher responsibility in order to not do that and to do the opposite to somebody else, because on the other hand, somebody else who hasn't had that experience of that horrible thing being done to them, they don't know how painful it is. So maybe you could argue that it's more forgivable for the one that hasn't had that experience if they do it to somebody else, because it's more in ignorance that they do it. Whereas the more we know how painful something is, the less excusable it is if we then go on and do that to somebody else. What, wouldn't you agree? That's my understanding, but
yeah, I think that's true. I do think sometimes there are things which are uh that are traumatic in a way that they kind of strangely rewire the person um to become compelled to repeat the behavior, right? And I
yes, I
think
think there's some
that,
psychological things around it. Like sometimes
right,
people interpret that negative behavior with feeling loved. They believe that, if somebody's hurting you, then it's because they love you, because that's what they were told. And
right,
therefore they use that as an excuse to do it to somebody else. And
right,
obviously God is the best of judges, and he looks into our hearts and
right.
looks at our intention. So obviously if the intention is, I'm going to do this painful thing to you because I love you, because
right,
that's what I was done to me, then that's something different. I'm not saying I'm not.
right, right. And for those people, obviously that's a psychological issue, but I'm sure that once they get in touch with the pain of it,
Mhm.
right? Then it's like, okay, so I'm not going to want to impose this pain on another person once I realize that, that somehow or another the pain and the love have gotten kind of mixed up for me, but that's not going to be the experience of this other person. And that's also, I think one of the difficulties is realizing that, not everybody is us. And that on the one hand, we don't want to do to other people what we don't want to have done to us, and we do want to do to other people what we do want to have done to us. At the same time, we also have to understand that sometimes to take care of other people, we have to think outside of our own box, and we have to look closely at what they need. That their
Exactly.
needs may be really
Men and
different.
women, yeah, men and women, for example, speak a different language, don't they? And
Uh,
actually, it's about trying to understand the way that others interpret being loved. So, what makes you feel loved? What can I do to make you feel loved might be different to what you can do to make me
I,
feel loved.
I, no,
So it's
really, it's
communicating.
I remember once having an argument about how to load a dishwasher, and 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 at the end of the day, it was all about love. It was all about, if you loved me, you would load the dishwasher this way, you
Mhm.
know? And I'm like arguing about a dishwasher. It was never about, there's a great video on YouTube called, I highly recommend it, called It's Not About the Nail. You can look it up. It's Not About the Nail. And and I'm not going to tell you what it's about. You have to look it up yourself. It's not about the nail. But it was not about the dishwasher. And so if a person needs the dishwasher loaded this way, and it's not going to like ruin my life to do that, then it's easy enough to do that. And I think that having that attitude of just kind of like, okay, if this is something that I can do for you, this is something I can do for you, and whether or your boss, if your boss needs a certain kind of respect. Maybe it's not something that you would ever need. It's not your thing. You're not that sort of person. But for that person, they need that, right? Some people respect is a certain kind of respect, a formalized respect is very important to them. And certainly, it's possible to give that to them. Um, and
Beautiful.
yeah, it's
That
I
it involves talking to each other, doesn't it? Talking to each other to understand what people like, what they want, what makes them happy, what makes them tick, what makes them feel loved.
Yeah, and
So,
to talk and to pay attention, to
okay.
actually listen to what they say. And nowadays, people say, "How are you?" Have a nice day. They don't even pause between the "How are you," but they actually say, "Really, how are you?" And if the person says, "Well, I'm struggling with this," then we know a little more about them and more about what they need.
Mhm. Yeah, so we sometimes, even if what you're saying is, even if we sometimes try to treat each other how we want to be treated, we can still get it wrong and still not, succeed in sort of making the other person happy. And that's why I guess it's important to always forgive each other, to pardon each other, to make excuses for each other. And because, yeah, so
But that's
hopefully,
also, but that's also, doing to others what you want. Like,
exactly, that's what I was going to say. I was looking for how I could say that, but yes,
how many ways do I make? Listen, how many mistakes do I make
exactly.
a day? If you could, I can't even list them. If I list every day how many times I make a mistake, whether it's a social mistake, whether it's a factual mistake, I make so many mistakes. So I have no choice. I mean, like if I have no choice but to be very, very generous with other people because I have lots and lots of mistakes and lots of imperfections. And so I have to, you know, if I'm being honest with myself, right? If I'm being honest with myself, I have to give everybody a lot of room because I have to give myself a lot of room or I'd never be able to make it through the day. So if I have to do that for myself, then I have to do it for everybody else too. And so I have to give them a break because I hope they give me a break because if they don't, then
So
I'm
sweet.
I'm, and also, the God piece, I want God to give me a break too. So if I
Well,
want
that's
God
the
to give
thing,
me a break,
having mercy, exactly. So the more mercy we have on others, the more mercy God will have on us. And I think it's the same with everything, really. The more we respect God's creation, the more because we're creation of God, will when I say respect, I don't mean respect as in, like your boss respect type thing.
yeah,
I mean sort of just respect, human life, respect um the laws of, of the world, um and God's law, mainly. If we respect his law and obey his law, then everything will be good. And yes, so that's very good. I think mercy, respect, kindness, forgiveness, gratitude, all of these things we desire. And we desire it, so we should also do it to others. We should show gratitude, we should show mercy, show forgiveness, show kindness, show respect.
simple as that.
Amen.
Okay. Thank you guys so much. This was I thank you so much,
Thank
Lale,
you so
and
much. Thank
uh,
you.
and I hope people will join us next week, and we'll do our best to give you good stuff.
Okay, shalom. Bye bye.
Uh,